I feel like I have a complex relationship with race. As a biracial person who's half Sri Lankan and half Italian, but very fully Canadian, throughout my life I've been very back and forth with my thoughts and feelings on these matters. Some days I feel more one way, other days I feel more the other way. It's just always been a bit complicated. Over the past few months, I've been thinking a lot about race, especially the whole year of 2020. So sit back, relax, and let's chat about being biracial. Hi, Vanessa Raquel here. Remember to like and subscribe if you're interested in this video and in this channel. So I've got 5 topics I want to talk about. Not feeling like you fit in, randomly feeling inexplicably connected to your culture, how people perceive you, being passionate about racism in general, and lastly, my friend's book, Burning Sugar, which is right here. We'll talk all about it later in the video, but in a nutshell, they're a Canadian poet and are super amazing and you should read it right now. Please go buy it. Okay, so not fitting in. Let's start with ways I felt like I didn't fit in on the different sides of my culture. On the Sri Lankan side, whenever we would hang out with my cousins, I was definitely the lightest skinned person in the room 9 times out of 10. Aside from the fact that a lot of my family members ended up marrying white people in terms of the actual Sri Lankan members of the family. I think I was often called the cappuccino cousin, which I thought was kind of cute, but was definitely another note of how I was different. Especially when I was growing up, I did not always eat the food. I wasn't really into spice until late teens, early 20s. When I went to an Indian restaurant, I ordered butter chicken and naan. I definitely don't speak Tamil. Never really watched Bollywood movies, except when maybe my grandpa was watching them, I'd see them in the background. And I never saw the country until I was about 22 years old. On the Italian side, I always forget the name of the small town near Rome where my family comes from. I'm not Catholic or Christian at all like the rest of my Italian family, which means that things like funerals, including my dad's funeral, when they're super religious, I feel extra uncomfortable and not a part of that. When I chat with Italian friends and they talk about how super tight-knit their family are, I see elements of that in the Italian side of my family, but I'm not necessarily super integrated into that. And in general, as a Canadian who grew up in a really white neighborhood in Toronto, I just always was kind of the mixed race other person. Every time you have to fill out one of those forms that's like what your background is, I feel like sometimes I'm like Canadian, sometimes it's Southeast Asian and European, sometimes it's, you know, other does not apply. Really varies every time. And also in life, like Sri Lankan and Italian isn't like a super common mix. For instance, I'm reading a book about being biracial right now called Blended, and it's about a girl who's half white and half black, which I think in general in North America, people are kind of familiar with that concept and there's like maybe more resources for them. I know once I met a Greek Indian person and we were like, hey, so close. So in general, didn't really feel like I necessarily fit into Sri Lankan culture and didn't really necessarily feel like I fit into Italian culture. Next topic is about feeling inexplicably connected. So when I finally had the opportunity to visit Sri Lanka, I was astounded with how at home I felt there. My sister had kind of warned me like, hey, it's your first time in Asia, there might be some culture shock elements, like just be wary of that. And I had just come from traveling from Peru, Bolivia, and Chile, where I definitely distinctly felt like this is an incredible culture and I'm learning so much, but it is notably not my culture or how I grew up. So I was kind of expecting the same thing when I got to Sri Lanka, but I was so wrong. I guess it's just throughout my whole life, I'd learned just little snippets here and there about the country. I had been exposed to the food enough. I knew of certain cities with different contexts. And most remarkably, my whole life, there's been these 3 posters of Sri Lanka, like tourist posters of Sri Lanka in my living room that are my mom's, that I think my dad had framed for her, like for a wedding anniversary or something. And one of them was of Sigiriya Rock, which if you know anything about Sri Lanka is kind of like a huge attraction, huge feature, one of those wonders of the world type vibes. And I actually had the experience of going there and climbing it, which was just indescribably amazing. And also the food the entire time did not upset my stomach because I was exposed enough to the culture and the food. And I always have this weird thing with spice where I find curries not very spicy, but I find like Frank's really spicy. Not like specifically Frank's, but like that type of more vinegary flavoring versus like actual legitimate spices that are in curries. And another way I felt really connected is when I wear sarees. So I never really wore sarees growing up, but I have gone to a few formal events in my 20s wearing a saree, and it just feels awesome. On the Italian side, this one's probably really silly, but when I play soccer, I feel at ease. My mom used to always joke that I was kicking from such a young age. My dad apparently used to be like, Vinny, let's go play soccer, like, And then my mom was like, please, but let it be a girl. And it's weird because like while I do kind of run, I don't really enjoy running, but when I play soccer, I feel like I can run forever. And also food-wise, I could eat pasta and pizza all day, every day. And on those rare opportunities where I've had legit pasta and legit pizza, I'm just like, oh. So I don't know if there's anything really to all these examples, but it's just been moments of my life where I felt like, oh wow, I get that je ne sais quoi feeling, sense of belonging, sense of connection. Number 3 is how people perceive me. So this one is super, super interesting and complicated for me. I grew up in a community of 95% rich white people, and I was notably the poor brown kid. I'm talking there must have been like under 5 people of color at my whole school. So for 18 years of being in this community through elementary school and high school, I just always so strongly identified as a brown person, felt like I was a brown person, felt like I was treated as a brown person. It just didn't even cross my mind that there was kind of another option. But then I kind of got into university and the real world, and slowly over time, I mean, from a literal complexion standpoint, I think I spent less time in the sun, so my skin is physically lighter than it used to be, which I have like honestly a complex over. I love tanning deeply and intimately because it makes me feel more connected with how I see myself, which is innately not really a brown thing. But then just all of a sudden, people thought I was white. And it's not like anyone has really been like, oh, are you white? It's more like, oh, your last name's Raponi, are you Italian? Or it's hanging out with other brown girls and they're like, oh, I wouldn't necessarily have known you were brown. And I'm like, so to me, the concept of being white passing is really dependent on the audience. To me, it's dependent on the time of the year. It depends on who you ask. I feel like to BIPOC folks, I'm very light-skinned. I feel like to super white people, I'm very clearly not white. So again, where do I fit in? I'm not white enough to be white, but I'm not brown enough to be brown. Brilliant. Number 4 is about being passionate about racism. So I've mentioned before that through NGQueers, we always took an intersectional approach to trainings about systems of oppression. So when we had the opportunity to talk about sex, sexuality, and gender, we always took it as an opportunity to talk about ableism, classism, and racism. And every time I was in front of crowds talking about racism, the 2 general focuses were either about Black folks or Indigenous folks. And I feel like over the years, I've just learned so much about these issues and become so passionate about them. And I feel almost a sense of connection to them. And I notice this also leads to sort of my interests, and again, kind of related to that second point of these inexplicable passions towards these things. Like when Lemonade came out by Beyonce, I remember it was like 1 in the morning and I sat on my couch in university and watched the entire visual album for like the whole hour that it was. And I feel like the entire time I was like glued to the screen, could not look away. And I just had this feeling like, wow, this is what it's like to be represented in media. This is what it feels like to see culture so beautifully expressed. I feel like every time I hear a single thing out of AOC's mouth, I'm like, oh my God, yes. Hoops, red lipstick, kind of a fashion sense I admire. Her policies, her speeches, just every single thing about her. I feel so empowered watching things from that woman. When I watched Hamilton, I almost cried again from the representation visually. I know there are lots of controversies about it these days, but I'm just saying how it made me feel when I first watched it. Reading The Hate U Give and watching the movie, again, just felt so connected with empathizing with the struggles and what was happening, even though I did not have a similar life experience at all. I just felt like I vibed so strongly with what was trying to be articulated. And yet, none of these things are technically my culture. They're either Black or Latin culture. So again, there's that feeling of I'm super passionate about these things, and maybe I'm getting that sense of fitting in because I'm advocating for these things that I feel a part of. And I've totally felt that feeling of being in a room full of white people who are arguing about the concept of white privilege, and you're like, I can't believe I'm the only person arguing the other side, but also I'm the only person of color here, so I guess it makes sense. So it's just, again, I don't really know. And lastly, and basically most importantly to me, is Burning Sugar. This book was amazing. I don't really read poetry. I'm an engineer. I know nothing about literature and similes and metaphors, but I could not put this down when I started reading it. Cicely Bell Blaine is an incredible human being. I met them when I was living in Vancouver, and they were doing loads of work with the Black Lives Matter chapter that they had founded. I went to maybe 4 of their training sessions. I actually found a video online of one of them, and that's me in the front row with my eyes glued to what's happening. They basically single-handedly taught me every single fundamental related to Black Lives Matter. I connected with this book as a queer person, I connected with this book as a femme, and I super connected with it as somebody who is biracial. So the excerpt is called Dear Diaspora Child. It's okay if you only learned about your culture from Google. It's okay if you only read your language at the public library. It's okay if you need books to know your ancestral recipes. It's okay if you've never even set foot on the soil of your people. It's okay if your hips don't sway to those rhythms. It's okay if the food is too bitter for your tongue. It's okay if English is the only language that flows freely from your mouth. It's okay if your wardrobe is just jeans and tees. It's okay if you only know Shakespeare. It's okay if spice brings you fear instead of joy. It's okay if you understand but can't reply. It's okay if you dread the disappointed stares of aunties. It's okay if small words like salam alaikum fall from your tongue like broken bones. It's okay if you spent your whole life shunning it all, only to now want it back. You are no less worthy, it is no less home. Love always, CB. Do it. Thank you so much for watching, and please let me know in the comments down below what you think. Are you biracial? Do you have similar experiences? Are you a person of only one race and you have a completely interesting take on this? Race is a complex topic. Let's keep talking about it. I'm really excited about this channel. Please make sure to like and subscribe if you're interested. As a reminder, my name is Vanessa Raquel and you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and all the various platforms. If you're interested in topics about race, you can check out my other video on Black Lives Matter. And I wish you all the best. Have a good one. Bye.